Hey guys, and welcome to another tutorial by Tutorial Grid. I am Cherokee Turner, your host for this evening, and what we are going to be focusing on today is matte painting. Some really interesting stuff. But first, before we get into it, why don't you go and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/avidproductions479. You can check out all the new projects and fun stuff coming up and what we've been up to. Hey, there's our tutorial right there. We've already updated. Check that out. Also, make sure to go to avidproductions479.com and check out our blog. We have a lot of cool stories about how we came to be, how our parent company Avid Productions 479 came to be, all our friends, what we did in college, as well as you can check out our tutorial grid stuff, and that is avidproductions479.com /avidblog or tutorial grid. But yeah, lots of cool stuff. So first off, what we are going to be creating today is we have this really cool scene, and what that looks like is this. All right, so what we've got is we have our scene right here. This is actually video footage that we took with a Blackmagic cam on the ProRes high quality setting because we were running out of room. We've got some background. We got some mountains that just kind of, flow in through here. We've got a parallaxing sky. With parallaxing, you'll kind of, we'll tell you what that's all about here in just a little bit. We've got, one of the cool things, we've got all these birds flying in from the side here, and we've got our sky masked out. So basically what that looks like, see, this is our actual video, still from the video footage. We took out the background, we added the sky. We added more of a realistic look to it. We did just all sorts of stuff. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find your footage. So my footage is right here. And you can download that at avidproductions479.com, as well as some of the other images we have that we'll be using. That way you have something to work with. So I'll just go ahead and drag this into my composition right here. So we'll just click that new composition, and that will match up my composition to the settings of my video footage. So if you scroll through here, we've got the video footage. It's nice and bright. And yeah, this is Blackmagic design footage, and it was made to be composited. So first off, what we have, the reason why I did the matte painting the way I did is it's really tough to key out the white sky with all the trees here. It's very high quality footage, but I just didn't like the outcome from trying to key out the white sky. So there are ways you can do this, but I chose the latter route and went with a different way. And I can show you that. So like if you wanted to, you can kind of play around with this footage. You can try the luminance. Oh, what is that? The Luma key. Luma key. I'm going to drag that in it. Key out darker to key out brighter. And you can mess with the threshold. So you can see, like, you can get a fairly decent look out of it. It's just not going to be as good as if you would just take out the entire background here. So that's kind of why I did it the way I did it. So yeah. So what we're going to do is we are going to find a spot in this footage that we want to key out. So we have this, and then it goes up, and it looks awesome. So let's key out this right here. So this is where our footage is going to start out. So I'll just go ahead and bring that forward and my mark in point forward. Reason why, we're going to play with some of this stuff here. So we'll have our footage go up, and yeah. And then we'll stop it. We'll stop it at 47 seconds. Now the reason why it does this is because the Blackmagic footage automatically reads the time code from where you stop your footage at, and I stopped it at 36 seconds and then restarted it at 36 seconds. So it's a little weird if you see it. Just think 36 seconds is now your 1 second mark if you're using this footage. Okay. So we've got that coming up. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mask. So we'll just make sure our footage is selected, select our pen tool, and let's go ahead and create the mask. Now the hardest part about this mask is going to be you're going to want to create it right below the horizon, because I want to take out all these trees completely. But the hardest part is going to be because we have these rocks and stumps over here, so we're going to have to mask those and animate it for this entire length. So we'll go ahead and start from here, and I know this mask is going to end at about right here, so I'll just kind of create this mask that has more of an oval look to it, and I will take the end here and I will move it back and kind of put it back where it usually should be, about right. Oh, I don't want it straight, come on, about right there. I will go ahead and zoom in here, and I will, nope, come on, I want it to be completely like this, and move this back down here. So I want to try to keep these edges as light as possible. All right, so I'll go back in here, go up. I can see it starts about right there. The stump end right here. Pull that down, push this up, and you're just going to kind of make a mask. Now, the better this is, the better it's going to look. So if you're creating like a higher end project, really get into the nitty gritty and make it look as good as possible. If not, I mean, you can just kind of go around the edges here and you can kind of mask it a little bit better. But yeah, we'll just create our mask and pull it back down through here and close it off. So now we've got our ground. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to hit M on our keyboard, and that's going to bring up our mask properties. And we want to go ahead and set a keyframe wherever we started this mask. So we'll go ahead and set a keyframe on our mask path. You'd usually want to start at the very beginning, but it really doesn't matter because you're going to have to animate this mask around the plane here. So usually what I would do is go all the way to the end and just double click on your mask and pull it down. And then zoom in and kind of move your pointers around so you know this is where it ends. Okay, so this mask animates along this line. Okay, so we've got our mask. So we've got our start point and our end point. So we'll just go ahead and go to the beginning and do another mask here. Line this back up. All right, go to the middle here. All right, so now that we have our mask completed, we've got a fairly good masking around here. You can notice that the stumps are a little bit masked out, so you can really see that we've got a little bit more added detail in here. It goes around this corner pin and looks pretty nice. So let's get through here quick. Right there. All right. Okay, now that we've got our mask done, what we're going to do is hit Control D, and we're actually going to delete the mask on the bottom layer here. And this is something that you can do before or after you create your mask. So this way we still have our mask layer, but we're also going to have a layer that is just going to be our footage, and just delete the mask there. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to type in 3D camera, and we're going to use our 3D camera tracker, and we're going to track the footage. All right, now that we have our 3D camera tracker tracked, or footage tracked, what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in, and we're just going to select one of our nulls here that is from our tracked footage, and we'll just right-click on that, create null and camera. All right, and that is all we have to do with that footage. So now that we have that finished, we'll just select our other footage, and we'll just rename this, and we'll just call this grass layer. Just so we know that's what that is. I always keep this bottom layer just in case I ever need it, but it's there just in case. So we've got our grass layer, we have our 3D camera, and we have our tracked null that we'll be using here in just a little bit. So the next thing that we're going to focus on is our 3D sky. So what we're going to do is we're going to go find our 3D sky layer, which is that right there. We'll just drag this down, and we'll put this for now on top of our on top of the grass layer. So what I'm going to do is, now that I have this dragged down, I'm going to make it into a 3D layer, and I'm going to hit P for position, and I'm also going to go to my null and hit P for position as well. Alternate click on my image position key stopper here, or a stopwatch, and pick whip that to the position of my null object. Okay, so now I have my null object, and since it finds it very close, I'm just going to go ahead and scroll this down here again. And I'm actually going to move the center of my image, so I'm going to click the down arrow on my image again. And under anchor point, I'm just going to play with my anchor point settings. So I'll just go ahead and scroll this up, and I'm going to want to scroll it up fairly high, and you'll see that. You'll see why here in just a second, and I want to scroll it over. Okay, scroll it to about the middle, and let's bring it up just a bit more, and scroll it back here. So take the anchor point and scroll it. You can scroll it down a little bit. Actually, let's scroll it down a little bit more, because I see that we've got some weird stuff here. So we'll pull this over to the right, about right there. Okay, and we have our clouds. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to drag this underneath our grass layer. So now we have a decent looking scene. Okay. All right. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create what's called a parallax. So basically what a parallax is, if you don't know, the sky looks like it moves faster the closer you are to the camera. So what the parallax does is allows the back to move way slower than the front. So one thing you can do is you can take your image and you can pivot it. So take your clouds and kind of pivot it towards you a little bit. So it gives you more of that parallaxing. And then under expose, where it says effects and presets, type in corner. And under distort, just drag over the corner pen tool and put that on top of your clouds here. And instead of having that say image, I'm just going to write clouds. Okay, so now that you have your corner pin, you have your upper left, which is going to be this guy right here, upper right. We're not even going to bother with the bottom pins here, okay? So on the upper left, you can see that pin right there, it moves it. So depending on which way you want your wind to blow, you're going to move it that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our very first layer here, and we are going to check just all of them on our first layer. And we'll go all the way to the end layer, or the end of our scene here. And we will just move this 500 pixels. Actually, I want it to move more than that. I want it to move 1,000 pixels. So I'm going to go negative 1,000 pixels. Okay? So basically my sky is going to be moving very fast. So, and on the upper right, I'm going to move it another 1,000 pixels. So we're just going to subtract our upper right corner pin because we're going to be moving it to the left. So instead of 5472, we're going to be 4472. So we'll just type in, click on it, 4472. And that's going to be moving on our x-axis. All right, so we play this back. We've got our sky parallaxing across our plane here, which looks pretty cool. Okay? You see that? The front of this moves a lot quicker than the bottom of this. Okay? So that looks pretty good. But if you know from just looking at any photograph or any video clip, the background is always lighter than your foreground. So your foreground is going to be more in focus. It's going to be more it's going to be a lot more contrasty. It's going to be a lot darker than your background. So what we're going to do is, what we can do is just go clouds, duplicate this layer, and we'll type in ramp. And we'll drag ramp down onto our clouds 2 layer. This is going to automatically take our cloud layer, and since we don't want to just create another black solid, we're just going to put that directly down onto our clouds layer since it's already set up and ready to go. So we're now going to drag down our black right here. We're just going to put it right there, okay? So that way it's going to get darker as it goes down. We're also going to change our end color. So click the white here. We're going to just change it to more of a gray because we don't want it to be completely washed out. We just want a little bit more washed out than our foreground. So we'll do that. And under mode on our clouds 2 layer, we're going to change it to, let's do multiply. Okay. So that's a little too much. So let's actually go, instead of multiply, let's do screen. That looks better. And if you don't like screen, you can also do add. Add's going to be way too bright. Maybe dodge. Dodge is pretty good. But just kind of play around. See which one that you think is best for your composition and kind of stick to it. So maybe a light. No. Let's see here. So what I did to kind of fix that, I kind of moved my black layer down. That way we have a completely nicer sky here. Then I just pushed this. You can play around with this setting to see what you like, but I made my gray a little bit lighter. You can push it all the way up to really make it lighter, but I wanted it to be a little lighter, but not as white as can be. So that's kind of what I got for now. So with the parallaxing, you can kind of see it. It's lighter in the background and darker in the foreground. You can also make a color adjustment, so curves, and put that down onto your clouds layer, and you can kind of give it more of an edgy look. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is whenever we have this type of a cloud layer, usually it's going to cast shadows onto our ground here. So we're basically going to do the same thing we just did, except what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate our clouds layer one more time. We're going to rename this Cloud Shadow. Okay. Now we'll also use our rotation tool, and instead of it rotating up, becoming our cloud layer, we'll just take it on the X layer and we're going to rotate it down. Okay. We'll also change our anchor point on our cloud layer, because if you notice, it overlaps onto our clouds. We want to take it, and we'll go to transform, anchor point, and we'll just kind of move it down just a little bit. Okay. And we'll also take our cloud shadow and put it on top of our grass layer. So now we have two sets of clouds. So what we're going to do is we are going to type in on our effects and presets, key light, and drag the key light down onto our cloud shadow. And we're going to take our eyedropper tool and we're going to select the blue. Okay. And we're going to turn our screen gain up just quite a bit because we don't want a whole lot of stuff going on. So what that's going to allow us to do now is we're now going to have holes in our cloud adjustment layer. So you can turn this up as much as you want to if you want like a little bit of holes, but I kind of want it to be quite a bit. So I'm going to change mine to about 200, around 200 to keep my clouds fairly happy. You can also change the screen balance if you want a little bit more of a denser cloud. I'll change mine to about 40, 42. I'm also going to change my screen mat. So select the screen mat and let's do screen softness. I'm going to make that really soft because our shadows are going to be fairly soft. Okay. All right. So now what I'm going to do is in effects and presets, I'm going to type in exposure. And I'll bring that also down onto my cloud shadows. Now what this is going to allow us to do is we'll just take our exposure and drag this all the way down. So now our clouds are going to be black because this is going to be our cloud shadow layer. Okay. Now we're also in the effects presets. We're going to type in blur. And we'll just go down here. You can also type in fast blur, but we'll just go ahead and drag this on over onto our cloud shadow layer. And we'll just blur this out just a little bit. Okay. And you can kind of, if you notice that your shadows are blending into your cloud layer here, you can also go back into your anchor point and move that down just a smidgen to try to combat that. But a little bit isn't too bad. We're going to be messing around with our background, so it's going to blend in a lot better. But we'll go ahead and keep it like this. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is on our cloud shadow, we're going to change our mode to multiply. We're also going to select T on our cloud shadow layer and bring this down to say about 30%. So now whenever we play this back, our parallaxing sky is also going to be reacting to our foreground layer. And it's also going to be moving in 3D space. That way we can see exactly what's going on. All right, so what we just did is we have the cloud layer, and now we have a cloud layer underneath reacting with our ground layer. So we have a little bit of highlight here, and we have a little bit of dark spots. So what that does is whenever you play that back, you can see that cloud layer move with our ground layer, making it look like the shadows are being cast from overhead. All right, the next thing we're going to do is I don't like the fact that we have nothing in our background. So before I had a little tree right here, and we'll just add a tree. Okay, so you can add as many things as you want. Let's see here. Where's the tree I want? All right, so I like this tree. So just, you can put really anything in your background. What you're going to want to do is whenever select the layer that you have in there or the tree, make sure it's selected in 3D. I don't like the fact that we've got green going on here, so I'm going to go ahead and change that. So I'll just zoom in as much as I can. Try to get as much of that green out as I possibly can here. Mask that out. Hit M and subtract. Okay. And And let's go ahead and pull this to our spot right here. All right, so you notice every time we add something in, since we're not moving forward or moving back, it's just a tilt all the way up. We don't really have to mess around with a lot of our 3D components because they're already going to be in our spot. Now, this might be different if you were moving forward or moving backwards. You're going to have to play around with your null objects. But since we have a very good understanding of this is just a tilt up, it's not too bad. But again, if you're moving forward, you might have to play around with your null object or parent any object you want to place into 3D with your tracked null. So I'm going to go ahead and select my dead tree, and I'm just going to bring it down in scale because I want it to be almost into our horizon. It's a very big tree, but I just want it to be in the background, just kind of there. Okay, and I'll also mask feather. I'll hit F for feather and just kind of feather that into the background just a tad because I want it to look as natural as possible. So the next thing we're going to do, let's add some mountains. I've got two different scenes here. I've got these mountains, which we're going to place in the background, as well as I've got these snowy mountains that I used. So let's go ahead and bring in the other snowy mountains. And if you have other mountains or anything else you want to place in the footage, by all means do it. So we'll just go ahead and drag these down. And let's just put this on top of our dead tree for now. And notice this picture is very, very large. So we'll just go ahead and scale this down into our scene. So first and foremost, what I'm going to do is I want to mask out most of this and just this part of the mountainous region. So I'll go ahead and deselect everything here. That way this renders a lot quicker. So go ahead and select your pen tool and make sure your image is selected and get started on your mask. I'll start right down here. I'm going to do this as quickly as possible because this is for tutorial purposes, so we can get to the rest of the tutorial. All right, so we've got our mask finished. Yay! That was a lot harder than what I thought it was going to be. It's a really, 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 really bad mask. But again, this is for tutorial purposes. If this is for a client, trust me, you're going to want to mask this way better than what I did. But let's just get right onto it. And go ahead and turn all our layers back on here. And yep, that is it. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to select our little mountainous region here. And let's go ahead and we'll place this into 3D. Pop right into 3D here. Move it up a little bit. And we'll just go ahead and push this into our background. Put it right underneath our grassy layer here. Okay. So what I just noticed is I have my clouds a little too close for comfort for my mountains. All right, so we've got our snow mountains here. Let's go ahead and bring these back, scale them down a bit. Maybe move this down. Mountains, pull them over right about there. All right, so now we have our mountains in our scene. Basically what we had to do was we had to push these a little closer to the camera in order to get them away from our cloud layer. So it's really easy, just push it right on up, and notice I have my cloud layer selected. But now we have our mountainous regions right in our background. And if you wanted to make it look a little further in the background, you can You can put an exposure layer onto your mountains here to make it look a little bit further in the background. So exposure under color corrections, drag that right down. And the higher this is up, the more of that foggy in the background distance it's going to be. So I'm liking that. Looks pretty good. Okay, and you can add some foreground layers. We might add some of those. But yeah, so we've got that. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drag out our next scene. So we've got this huge mountainous region. We'll just go ahead and drag that right down on top of our dead tree layer again. Again, we're going to do a lot of masking, so we'll mask all that out. So drag this down, scale it down a little bit, and start on the masking. All right, now that we have our mountainous 3D done, we've got our mask completed. We'll just go ahead and set this into 3D space. Go ahead and turn back on our layers here. And let's go ahead and drag this beneath our snowy horizon. And again, we'll probably have to push this up into our Z space a little bit here. Let's make sure it's behind our mountains here. Not that much, about right here. And we'll go ahead and drag this down and make sure our scale is okay. Push this down and push it back into our horizon here. All right. Push it back a little more here. About right there. And you can even, if you wanted to look more in the horizon, you can kind of pull it, push it down. Push it back a little more. All right, so we've got those in the background, but I don't like the fact that they're darker than my foreground here. So what I'm going to do to fix that is I will select my layer here. Again, go to color correction, exposure, or type in exposure into your effects and presets. Drag that all the way down and put that on top here. And just push up the exposure just a little bit. And you're also going to mess with the gamma, because the gamma is going to bring it to where it looks way more in the background here. Okay? Maybe change the exposure, push it back down a little bit. We're going to want to lighten it up just a little bit and then bring it back down also. So now what we've got is this. We've got our layer, we've got the stuff in the background, and we've got some stuff in the foreground. So what we're going to do, I don't like the fact that our ground is so dark. So I'm just going to go ahead and put on a curves adjustment on our ground. We'll just bring that up onto our grass and bring up the brights and bring down our darks. Try to give it a little more contrasty look. It's looking pretty good. You can also change your blue layer, or really any layer, if you want to give more of that weirder look. I'm going to bring up the blues just a tad bit, but in my darker layers, I'm going to bring down the blue to give it more of that contrasty blue gold look, more of that cinematic look. All right, go. Looking pretty good. I also don't like how blue my mountains are, so I'll go ahead and give them a curves adjustment as well. Blue. Bring down the blue just a little bit, because it's just way too blue for what it should be. All right, there's that, and put another curves adjustment on the lower layer here. Blue. Bring down the blue just a tad bit. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to create these flying birds. Okay? So what we're going to want to do is we're going to have to set up the birds. So in order to do that, we have this little thing that is included, which can be found at avidproductions479.com under the projects folder or the project download folder. It's just something free I found from YouTube. So, I mean, go with whatever like bird file you have, or this can be set up with a 3D layer that has been brought out in PNG layers or whatever, or you can use this little green screen effect. But you can drag that down, our little flying birds thing. And what you'll do is you're going to set this up. You're going to find where your 3D bird starts. So we'll say it's right there. And just go ahead and get rid of all this stuff because we're not going to need it at the moment. Find the end. And there's the end right there. All right. So we have our bird. And we'll just go ahead and push this into our composition here. Line it up with our very beginning. Actually, you'll want it to be right here. The very beginning of our composition. And what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that is selected. Go to Layer, Pre-Compose. Move all attributes into the new composition and hit OK. And you'll double click on your flying bird here in your effects and presets. Type in Key Light. Drag this down onto your bird and select the green with your eyedropper tool. Okay? So this actually did a fairly good key. I'm quite surprised. For mine it was a little different. Okay, good. So now we want them to fly. If you want them to fly in from the left, you can keep this as is. If you want them to fly in from the right, which I do, I'm going to flip this. So if you want to, you can click on your title action safe right down here on the left. And you notice this is where it starts. Just take it and drag from the right and flip to the left. And you do not want to hold down shift, because if you hold down shift, it'll do what you just saw. It'll flip the entire thing around and upside down, which isn't what we want it to do. So now that we've got our layer flipped and we got our little bird, we'll go back into our composition here and we will actually shut it off. And we will turn all our layers back on. And now we will go to Layer, New, Solid. And we'll call this Birds Flying. And make sure it's black. And you'll hit OK. You go to Effects and Presets and type in Particular. Okay? And you will drag that onto your black solid. Okay, so now we have our background. We've got a particular layer. What we're going to want to do is we're going to set up our bird layer, and then we're going to turn it off immediately because this is going to be our test. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our particle layer, and under particle type, we'll hit sphere and change it to sprite. Okay. Now we'll also go to texture, and we'll go to layer, none, and we'll hit none, and we'll type in, or we'll select flying bird, sparrow, or whatever layer that you're wanting to use. You might get a warning. Layer size is too big, 1920 by 1080. It needs to be so you can fly through the camera or whatnot. This is fine. Yes, it's going to be a fairly large layer because we're looking at a large number of pixels. So it doesn't matter. It's fine. Hit OK. It's going to render very slow. And if you find that nothing comes up here, like it is completely gone, what you're going to want to do is under size, you're going to bring up your size. And now we have our birds. Okay? So we have all these little birds. But the unfortunate thing is they're all flapping at the exact same time. Okay? So what you're going to want to do is under time sampling, go to current time and go to random loop. And this is going to take many instances of this layer, and it's going to loop it many different times for each particle in our bird flying layer. So now we have a bunch of different birds flapping their wings at different times, which is what we want to do. So now that we have this set up, you can change the random seed if you don't like the way this looks, but we're not going to really focus on this right now at the moment. We're actually going to change back our particle type to a sphere. Okay? So now we have these big old spheres. Now remember so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to change our physics because we want these to fly in from the right and go to the left. So we're going to have this start off screen. So we'll go into our emitter and we'll move this 960 and we'll move it to the right. We want it to start off screen completely. And we don't want it to start in the middle. We want it to start from up top. So push this up to the top. So 540 at a less number to like 160-ish is going to make our layer start from the top. Okay? So now we have our layer and it starts and it's going to move up and then it's going to start to flow in. But we don't want it to start at the beginning of our composition here. We want it to start right here, right at the beginning of our layer, or at the beginning of our own mark in point, okay? So whenever it goes up, it's going to start, or we can push it back. But we'll just go ahead and leave it here for now. Okay, so in the middle of this scene, we'll leave it at about right here. What we're going to do is we're going to go into our physics layer. Select a little drop-down arrow. We want to keep our physics model as air and hit our drop-down under air. Now what we're going to do is we're going to change our wind X and our wind Z. So if you notice in our bird layer, our birds are flying to the left, but they're also flying in our Z space, okay? So we want to notice where they're flying, okay? So back in our layer, we'll go down again to our air, and we're going to change the Z-axis, or our X-axis on our wind. We'll just move that to the left, okay? And if you notice, our clouds move to the left as well. So we want them to move just enough that by around this time, some of them are in, some of them are out. And it really all depends on how fast you want them to move. I don't want mine to move that fast, so I'll just do it about 600. You'll also move them in Z space. So the further to the right you push it, or the higher this number goes, the more farther back they go. The less number means it's moving further into or away from our Z space. So we want this to be moving towards us, okay? So we'll just go ahead and move this to about negative, I'll just leave it at about negative 600, okay? So negative 600. Now, if you don't like the way this is coming up, that you're going to see a lot of these particles really up top, you can move your cursor down here and you can kind of move it, have them start from the bottom or a little bit more. Okay, so you can move this around, play around with it. It's up to you where you want them to start from, but kind of play around and see where you like it. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back into our particle layer under particle type, sphere, and we'll change it right back to our sprite. And now we've got birds. We have birds in our scene, and this is what that looks like. So we've got it coming up, and we've got our birds flying in. Okay? So that looks pretty good. They're coming right out at us, but I want this to be a little bit further down. Okay? Because I want them to be coming out for almost as if they're coming from the horizon. Okay? Maybe not that much. Maybe about right. About right there. Now, another thing we can do to kind of give this more of a realistic effect is if you don't want a lot of them, you can change it to like 50. And it'll just take away a couple of them, or you can leave it at 100. It doesn't matter. It's up to you. You can also do velocity random, so they'll move a little bit quicker or a little bit more in a random notion. You can kind of change that up just a little bit. And velocity random, yeah. Kind of change the distribution a little bit. You can kind of mess with the random size. I don't know why you would do this. I mean, maybe just a little bit to give it more of that random look again. I would definitely do the life for seconds. So just move that up to, so we've got a composition of 7 seconds. So just bring it up to like 6, 7 seconds. That way they stay on for the entire lifespan of the composition. You can also checkbox on your motion path, and that will make things look a little bit more realistic, as if they're flying right through your composition here. And it's just going to really add a lot to our composition. So it just gives it that movement. So there are birds just freaking flying into this camera, and it's looking pretty good. And it's cool because the further away they are, they're more crisp because they're moving technically less. But the closer they get to this camera, they are just flying right at the camera. And you can really mess around with the way the settings are. If you want them to fly out from back behind the mountains and like come up and over and down throughout, there's a way you can do that, which is really cool. But that's for another day and another tutorial. But yeah, they're just coming right at us. Another thing you can do is you can kind of give this a flare. If you want, go to Layer, New, Solid. We'll just call this Flare. Hit OK. Type in your effects and presets, optical flare. And you want it to be subtle. Trust me, just this really itty-bitty subtle flare that'll just give it a little bit more zing. Go to your lens preset browser, natural flare, and let's give it this, not sun, no, go back, light, no, pro presets, no, I thought it was in here, where, just want like a small, right here, golden light, maybe, well, no. Distant sun, that'll work. All right, we'll use the distant sun here. Hit OK. You can go from on our flare from normal to, let's just do screen. Make sure this source type, instead of 2D, hit 3D. Move your flare over here into the distance, and watch your magic happen. All right, and this is what we've got. All of our birds are flying through, and we've got our little bit of a flare going on. We've got our background. We've got our parallaxing sky. We've got our filter on the bottom here. And if you want to give this more of a shadow, you can go into, let's see, which layer do we got here? Clouds 2, cloud shadow. Go back into your cloud shadow layer. Duplicate that once and kind of give it more of a tougher look with some of these other filters. Like use maybe a color burn filter. Just kind of give that more of a harsher shadow here. Kind of gives it that rougher look. And you can just kind of really play around with this. But yeah, this is really fun. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in some of these tutorials. I hope that you enjoyed watching me do this for you, and And yeah, I mean, this is there's a lot of things that you can do with this type of tutorial. I mean, you can literally the ideas are endless that you can do. I mean, you can put cities, you can do anything that you want. I mean, it's a crazy tutorial, especially with like these birds. If you have better 3D birds, they're gonna look way better. You know, if you have a better sky, it's gonna look better. If you have more stuff to put in the background, there's a million things that you can do with stuff like this. Matte painting is probably one of the most important things you'll ever learn in After Effects because the opportunities are endless. But anyway, guys, make sure you check out the Facebook at facebook.com/avidproductions479. Also check us out at avidproductions479.com. Read our blog. Guys, it has been fun. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have, and stay tuned for more tutorials. I'll see you guys later.